Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other co-conspirators?
We'll keep the microphone open there for questions from reporters, though not a surprise that Jack Smith is not answering any of those questions as he leaves the podium. He was very short in addressing the American people, again, inviting American voters across this country to read this 45-page indictment. As he did last time, he said the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But he did start by saying this was a defendant who was fueled by lies, and he spread those lies across the nation. It heavily affected this nation's process for collecting and counting votes in America. He talked about the men and women who were defending the Capitol on January 6th. He called them heroes, in his words. He said we will seek a speedy trial with a fair jury. And that brings up the question, Dan Abrams, for those watching at home, how this could potentially, and none of us really know the full answer to this, affect the presidential election on its way. But is there a scenario where both of these cases are tried and finished before the election?
There's a scenario, absolutely. I think it's unlikely, but there's a scenario. Look, in a typical case, I would tell you, wait, you're talking about November of 2024? And you're asking me, can they finish the case before then? The answer would be absolutely. Of course they can. When you're talking about this case, for example, in the documents case, it's already been pushed back to May of 2024. I expect that that one will get delayed again for certain. Now, this judge is not a judge who is, going to be necessarily as sympathetic to some of the arguments as Aileen Cannon may have been. This is a district that tends to move these kinds of cases certainly more quickly than that. But there will be arguments by the Trump team to try to delay this, to try to push it back as much as possible. You're going to hear, and you just heard Jack Smith say he's going to pursue a speedy trial. But that's really a right that belongs to the defendant, not the prosecutor. It's the defendant's right to a speedy trial. So it's the defendant that tends to have a lot of power and control over how fast a case moves. But this is where the judge becomes critical. Yes, there are going to be questions of admissibility of evidence, et cetera. But in a case where this political campaign and the legal case intersect, the most important power this judge is going to have is, does the trial happen before the election or not? And we'll just have to see what happens with that.
And it's not just this judge. We looked into this before we came on the air as well. Just about every judge, if not every judge in the district, has presided over one of these January 6th related trials.
Right. And even the Trump-appointed judges have not been soft on the January 6th rioters. I mean, best case scenario, there was one judge who dismissed a particular charge, actually one of the charges that's charged here. But it's different because in that case, the question was, did the person have corrupt motive? Meaning, were they doing it knowing that what they were doing was illegal and wrong? Well, here the whole document is an explanation of why Donald Trump knew what he was doing was corrupt and wrong. So even if there's a higher standard established for one of these crimes, if you believe Donald Trump is guilty, they've laid out an explanation for why that issue wouldn't apply. So my broader point is, Trump judges, Obama judges, Bush judges, whatever the case may be, these are still going to be some difficult legal arguments for the Trump team to win.
And many of these judges have handed down very serious sentences for people related to January 6th. I want to bring in Asha Rengappa, law professor, Yale Law School, former special agent, New York FBI. And Asha, one of the questions from many people in this country for so long has been in watching all of these January 6th cases as they played out in Washington, D.C., whether or not the people at the very top would be prosecuted as well. And now, not only do we have this case, we know it will play out in Washington and in front of a judge who has presided over some of these very cases before.
Yes. Well, 3 of the counts here are conspiracy charges. And a conspiracy is an agreement to commit a crime. So what Jack Smith has been able to do is to pierce this cone of silence that Donald Trump has always been able to create around him, where he's able to have intermediaries, lawyers, people that he has conversations with and then will, do much of the work. He's been able to pierce that inner circle. And we have evidence in this indictment of actual conversations, actual communications that really connect Trump to that agreement to use deceptive means to block this election. That's pretty extraordinary. I also think that this indictment is significant in that Jack Smith was able to bring in depictions, evidence of the violence that unfolded on January 6th. This is a spectacle that everyone remembers from watching it unfold on television. And this was a very tricky area. You mentioned that he wasn't charged with insurrection. That would have encountered a lot of First Amendment issues because it would have been based on Trump's speech. But he was able to bring this in by using the charge of deprivation of rights, that what Trump was trying to do is prevent these people from getting their votes counted using intimidation and violence. So this is a very clever charges and straightforward charges that will ideally be streamlined since he's only named Donald Trump as of right now as the defendant.
Asha Rengappa with us here. Asha, thank you for your perspective as always. And she makes a very good point about avoiding insurrection charges or charges connected to that because of constitutional defense of free speech in this country, John. But Jack Smith does talk about what Donald Trump was doing as this was playing out on the Capitol, and instead of trying to halt it, allowing it to proceed.
If you remember when he was impeached on this, he was impeached for inciting the riot. That's not what's going on here. But Jack Smith makes the allegation that Trump tried to exploit the riot to achieve his overall goal, which is disrupting the proceeding to certify the election. He says directly, on the evening of January 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator Warren attempted to exploit the violence and chaos at the Capitol by calling lawmakers to convince them, based on knowingly false claims of election fraud to delay the certification. And this is pretty amazing. He calls 2 senators directly. Co-conspirator number 1 calls 6 members of Congress.
John Carl with us. We know that John Santucci, our reporter who has covered Trump for many years, has now talked to the former president. John, what's his reaction at this hour?
David, I just hung up the phone with former President Trump. He seemed rather relaxed, David, said that he has read through the indictment, said he's been on the phone. David, the words he used in speaking to me, he said it's pile on from special counsel Jack Smith. More charges. I asked him, David, did you expect this? Were you prepared for this? And he said, again, it's election interference. It's another effort by the Democrats. This is Donald Trump, David, to ABC News. Another effort by the Democrats to attack the 2024 election. And he said, David, that it's just going to keep going on. And I questioned him on that. And I said, what does that mean, Mr. President? And he said, just more charges, more charges. He then maintained, David, that he believes he is leading in the polls and that he is going to go on to, again, this is former President Trump, he believes that he will defeat Joe Biden. I then said, what's your overall word for everything that has been the last couple months with these indictments, David? Donald Trump telling me ridiculous.
I do want to ask you, John, though, because you were on the air with us just about a week ago when the target letter was made public. And at the time, our team was reporting that Donald Trump's legal team was somewhat surprised by that target letter, that they thought that perhaps they would be able to avoid this particular federal criminal indictment, that the classified documents case would move forward, but that this was one that they thought perhaps they would get by.
Yeah, David, and I had heard that in real time, too. And Donald Trump, I'm told, at that time, that's 2 Sundays ago, David, was stunned by it. And at this rate, David, I think Donald Trump, from what I hear and from just speaking to him right now, his voice sounded like someone almost resigned to it. I've spoken to the former president, as you know, David, many times over nearly 10 years of covering him now. Didn't sound angry, didn't sound excited, sounded as if he was just sitting back and swiped the phone and answered when we just spoke a moment ago. But again, David, I think that the 2 words that just struck me in speaking to him just now, pile on. I think just from talking to aides around him and now speaking to the former president himself, it just seems like in Donald Trump's mind, this was just another day.
And that will be part of the political message, surely, in moving forward. One more question for you, John, and it's on a related note, because he's been on, obviously, campaigning, been on the trail these last couple of days, answering questions, was on one radio show, was actually asked if going forward you get these indictments and you got a jury in D.C., this is the questioner asking, you get convicted and sentenced, does that stop your campaign for president if you're sentenced? The host asked him. He replied, not at all. There's nothing in the Constitution that says it could stop me. Not at all.
Yeah, and David, I think right there in his response to me when I just hung up with him, he seemed full steam ahead, maintaining again, talking about the polls, saying we're going to keep on going forward. And as Rachel Scott noted with you earlier, David, Donald Trump out on the campaign trail this weekend, again, hammering that fact. He's going to keep charging ahead, keep moving forward. And look, we don't even have to take Donald Trump's words for it. You mentioned earlier that New York Times Siena poll, it just came out in the last couple of days. He is doing well at the moment, David, but obviously another indictment is something that Donald Trump and his aides don't take lightly.
Well, and they shouldn't. It's an extraordinary moment in American history, and we shouldn't gloss over it for sure. John Santucci, our thanks to you. I want to bring in our Chief Global Affairs Correspondent, Martha Raddatz, who was there at the Capitol on January 6th. And Martha, you could hear really in Jack Smith's voice there as he presented his short statement to the American people, the weight of this, though trying to distance himself from the politics of it all, say presumed innocent until proven guilty, but asked the American people to read this.
And to remember January 6th and saying that the men and women in law enforcement were heroes that day, and indeed they were. And what the American people also need to think about is the effect that day had on them. You've talked to them before, David, and interviewed them, and the wounds, the injuries, the looking back on that day, they will never be the same. And that day for me, up on the Hill and talking to people who said they were there because Donald Trump wanted them to, quote, stop the steal. That was the whole idea of the speech that Donald Trump gave that day. It was a rally. He told people to go to Capitol Hill. And his closing words again, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to try and give the Republicans the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. At the time, the Secret Service knew there were armed men in the crowd. I interviewed people in tactical gear, and I saw them communicate with one another on Capitol Hill. It's a day we should all remember, David.
Martha Raddatz talking about that day. Jack Smith talking about it as well moments ago, saying that the chaos around this country involving, Martha, thank you, involving the election and those weeks leading up to January 6th was fueled by lies from the defendant. And of course, the defendant he was speaking of was former President Donald Trump, who at this hour, you're watching ABC News Live coverage, has been charged with 4 counts. This is the second federal criminal indictment of the former president. Conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice Correspondent.
Again, this case is one that the Justice Department will probably consider one of the biggest and most important cases in its history. Indicting a former sitting president who's now running for office is not something that they ran to do. The Attorney General was very methodical in the approach. But this special counsel, again, David, the most aggressive prosecutor I've seen in 20 years of covering the Justice Department.
And again, Jack Smith saying he invites the American people to read this 45-page indictment. A former American president now charged with obstruction and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and again, conspiracy against rights. And of course, those rights allude to votes in this country being counted in the way they were intended. For many of you here in the East, World News Tonight begins in just about 5 seconds. I'm David Muir. I'll see you for World News.